Thank you for the introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And again, I would like to say thanks to Joe for inviting me back again this year to speak, which hopefully means that I did something right when I spoke last year. And in particular, inviting me back to speak on a subject which I'm very, very passionate about, which is job creation here in Ireland, and which is the theme of this evening's session. And I guess, with all due respect to all of the other discussions that we've had and will have here at the MacGill Summer School during the course of this week, and with respect to what Mary said around the Brussels deal that we did last year, I'm going to put it to you here tonight that actually the job creation is the single biggest issue, and we are here tonight discussing the single biggest issue that faces this nation as we go forward from here. Now, the first 100 days of government have been consumed by banking issues and by the fallout from the bailout, and I think justifiably so, in many respects, because of the fact that without a banking system working effectively in Ireland, we don't have credit. Without credit, we don't have any consumer spend, and the consequence of that is, as we've all seen over the last couple of years, the shutters coming down on businesses the length and breadth of the country. And I think it's important to say that hopefully you can hear me okay, but I think it's important to say, thanks Joe, as we go forward now and looking forward from here, in the last couple of weeks, again, we've had a lot of discussion and debate around, and again, justifiably so, it was discussed at a couple of the sessions I attended here, the whole area of the impact on services, particularly local services such as hospitals and schools. But I guess if I was to stand back, I would throw down the gauntlet tonight to all of the speakers here, myself included, to say that if we are really serious about taking our destiny into our own hands, and there has been a lot of discussion around that in a number of the sessions that I've attended, then I think we really need to get serious about jobs, and we really need to put the job creation agenda centre stage in everything that we're doing and saying, both as employers and as a state going forward. Never miss the opportunities, never let a crisis go to waste. It presents the opportunity to do big things. And rhetorically here tonight, I guess I'm going to ask the question again of myself and the speakers, are we in danger of letting this crisis go to waste when it comes to public service reform and job creation? And a stark reminder of that were the CSO statistics which were issued last month, which reminded me personally that there are 547,968 reasons for us to up our game when it comes to job creation. And there are 547,968 reasons for us to actually treat this as a matter of urgency. So just a little bit of context to the introductions that Mary said. If I was looking at Ireland today, I'm probably stating the obvious by saying we badly need an industrial policy. And I personally see that as a blend of how we take Irish small to medium-sized companies, how we grow them into Irish multinationals, and how that sector, coupled with the foreign direct investment sector, work together to build the new Ireland and the jobs, I guess, that they will bring to us going forward. My area of expertise is foreign direct investment, and that's what I'll talk about tonight. And I'll talk to you about how I see the troika of competitiveness, education, and the cost of government, and how I see that what I see or how I see their role will be to driving future investment in Ireland going forward. So let me first of all give you a state of the nation as I see it as far as the foreign direct investment sector is concerned. Now, last week we saw the IDA announce that foreign direct investment was up 20% year over year. And in fact, as I'm sure you're all very well aware, Ireland has showed incredible resilience in the face of a very tough recession as a preferred location for foreign direct investment. There's no question about that. What I would say there is that I think we have to be very careful that that foreign direct investment has been around for a long time. I think it will be around for a very long time going forward, but we can't take it for granted. we can't take foreign direct investment for granted in Ireland. And the reason for that is that we are up against incredible and immense competition for every job that foreign direct investment creates in Ireland. What I've seen over the past 2 years since the first time I spoke at Glenties are the rising of Eastern Europe, the emergence of South America and other locations who would give anything to bring in the foreign direct investment that Ireland has brought in here into their own states. So we are really up against it, and that game has really increased over the last couple of years. Having said that, though, I have to tell you that as a company that has invested here, the Ireland product is still very, very good. And we're actually, contrary to what you might believe around what you might read or hear, the product is good. We have a very high skills base. We have lowering labour costs in this country. We have a favourable tax regime. And we have clusters of companies, whether they're in pharmaceuticals, ICT, technology and other areas, which make it very attractive for sister companies of the likes of HP and pharmaceuticals and others to come in here. What we have, and to cite an example of that, I'll use my own company, where I think we have been very successful over the last couple of years in translating the competitiveness achievements that Ireland has gained into jobs and investment. 2 years ago, Ireland was not on what we call our global location strategy, which is where the corporation looks to invest. Today we are. In the last 2 years, we have announced over 1,000 new positions in Ireland in the teeth of one of the coldest and toughest recessions that we have experienced, as we all know. In Kildare, which is one of our bases in Ireland, we have built one of HP's largest multilingual customer support centres in Europe. And today we're supporting customers in 24 different languages from our base there. We have completely reinvented our Galway operation into a cloud development centre, a cloud computing development centre, and a software development centre for HP internal systems. And some of you probably read last week in the media, which is true, and I can confirm it for you here tonight, that we are embarking on building one of the largest office campuses in Galway to house this new and growing part of our operation. And certainly last but not least, we've expanded in Northern Ireland as well. We have placed up there a software development division, which is one of the only software development centres of excellence for the work it does that HP has in Europe. So Ireland is doing a lot of things right. And again, I would say, don't be misled necessarily by what we read or what we hear, because the story is still very, very positive if you're a foreign direct investor. Now, at the heart of that lies the troika, as I said, of competitiveness, education, and the cost of government. So let me take competitiveness first. The reality is, despite all of that, that most of the competitiveness gains that we have achieved as a nation in the last 2 or 3 years have been as a result of international cyclical factors. And the reality is that most of the countries and geographies that we're dealing with haven't been hit as hard by recession as Ireland has been. And when it comes to Eastern Europe or South America, they certainly have also benefited from the cyclical competitiveness factors that I've alluded to. So I would say that from an Ireland perspective, we haven't yet hardwired the serious structural changes into our competitiveness DNA that we need to ensure the long-lasting benefits or the longevity of the competitiveness gains that we've made as a nation. Think about that for a second. It exposes us to changes that happen around us. And what you don't want to do when it comes to change is you don't want change happening around you. You want to be leading change. When I spoke here 2 years ago, nobody had heard about cloud computing. Now it's a huge trend in our industry. You simply can't afford to miss a boat like that. And when it comes to competitiveness, the sands are shifting every day and every year. And my message there, and it has been to government, is that we have to hold the line on the competitiveness adjustments that we've made, and we have to make more. I fully empathise with the trials and tribulations of the minister here who has tried to reform the JLC system recently. Everybody accepts the need for reform. Everybody accepts the need for change, but the reality is that, with respect to the Minister, it's easier to win the Grand National than it is to reform some of the systems that we have in this country. And the script to drive down the cost of doing business in this country has already been written. And if you look at the report that the National Competitiveness Council published in June, to my mind, it charts the course of how you reduce the cost of doing business in this country. It covers labour costs, it covers utility costs, it covers property costs, and it covers the cost of doing business in general. So, on competitiveness, I would say, if we're serious about hardwiring into our DNA the type of structural changes that we need to make as a nation to make those competitiveness gains count for us in the future, then we need to implement that report and the recommendations therein. And we also need to do that as a unified government. One voice, one government, implementing what that Competitiveness Council has recommended. So from a competitiveness perspective, that's what I would say about that. The second part of the Troika I would discuss would be education. I spoke here last year about the reform of second-level education in this country. I think education is the route to job creation, is what I said then, and I absolutely mean that today. An example would be that we advertised 100 jobs in Galway last December, and we had 700 applications for those jobs by the end of January, and we had the bulk of those filled. We were able to go back to the corporation, to the mothership, and say, look, we have got another 600 applications for jobs that you're trying to fill in this space. Bring those jobs into Ireland because we can locate them here. We got the OK for that, and now we have those jobs filled. Education is the route to job creation. Now, but we need a modern curriculum at second level, and that's the area where I have most familiarity with. It's great to see bonus points coming in for maths being announced, but the reform agenda has to continue. I want to see science compulsory for leaving certificate in this country. But for me, it isn't all about maths and science. I mentioned to you earlier on, we're supporting 24 languages from our Kildare headquarters. I want to see at least 2 international languages being mandatory at leaving certificate in this country over the next 2 years. And I want to see an Asian language choice being one of those, and I've said that before. Now, I know a lot of schools around the country are already trialling Asian language as part of their transition year programmes, and I would certainly dearly love to see that mainstreamed in the education system going forward. But be under no illusion that the education system that Ireland offers today, again, it has its flaws, and I'm sure it's to be discussed and debated here in the next couple of days, is still world class. And I think if we make the modifications that we're talking about, and we bring maths and science and up the ante there, and particularly if we're setting up for success, supporting global customers from Ireland, we need to develop the skills and competencies that we need in order to do that. And international languages are key. 2 languages might sound like a lot if you're in the current system in Ireland. There's people that work for me that speak 7 or 8 different languages, and they're supporting customers across 5 or 6 different geographies. I mean, if there's 2 people going for a job and one has those level of language skills and the other doesn't, well, it's very obvious who the successful candidate is going to be. And then the third part of my troika is the cost of doing government, or the cost of government. And I think the cost of government is an intrinsic part of the competitiveness equation. I think the appointment of a minister for public expenditure and reform is a huge step forward in the new government. And it's a huge opportunity to drive change and reform in the public service. And we simply cannot let that opportunity go to waste. Ireland needs, as we heard earlier on today, a cost-effective and efficient public service. Reform and change in the public service are no longer an option. They're an absolute necessity. And there are 3 dimensions of that change that I want to talk to you about. And I'm sure there will be plenty of questions because I know one of them was discussed earlier on. I want to talk about outsourcing in the public service. I want to talk about procurement, which was discussed earlier on. And I want to talk about bringing new talent into the public service. Let me start with outsourcing. Outsourcing is a game changer. It's an absolute game changer that we are in danger of missing a trick on. The McCarthy report in 2009 identified it as potentially delivering significant cost reductions to the Ireland Public Service. 2 years on, we haven't really moved that forward. And I'm really looking to the comprehensive spending review to identify comprehensive timelines, specifics around timelines on how we're going to up the ante on outsourcing in Ireland. Now, I have to declare to you that I do have a vested interest here. HP is one of the largest providers of outsourced services to governments worldwide and many private sector companies. We also have outsourced a huge amount of our own activities along the way. So I've seen with my own eyes the benefits that outsourcing can bring both to a customer or a client and to a company as large as our own. So in that sense, we really need to look at outsourcing as a serious topic of conversation, which very few people in this state are currently looking at it as. They're seeing it as a threat. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to move work and people into the private sector to deliver a more efficient service to the public sector. Using disruptive technologies like cloud-based technologies, like shared services that was mentioned earlier by Robert, or outsourcing, are standard business tools now that every single organisation globally is using to drive its own efficiency and cost. The Irish government should be no exception. In fact, the Irish government should be taking the lead in that particular space. And that's outsourcing. In relation to public procurement, which was mentioned earlier, I think that's a huge opportunity to drive not just cost improvements, but value improvements to government and to the taxpayer. And if we look at Robert mentioned a figure of 15 million. I actually thought it was closer to 15.5 to 16, which is about 10% of GDP. That's an enormous volume of economic activity. And we should be making sure that we're getting the best value for government from that. And let me give you a very simple example. Last year we spent €63 million on ICT in schools in this country. And I said to the then Minister here at the time that if you centralised the procurement of that, you would get far better value, far better standardisation and far better service than if you do what ultimately was done, which was diffuse that across the state and allow salami sliced it out to individual schools to do their own procurement. If you go to the ICT sector with a €63 million budget, I can guarantee you that you'll get better value than going out across individual purchases for that particular spend. So we're missing a trick there. In government, I would be reverse auctioning or e-auctioning every transaction that this state makes, whether it's buying mineral water, whether it's buying hotels, flights, paper. Every transaction that this state makes should be done using reverse auctioning, which is a standard technique among any international company right now. I know that those statements mightn't necessarily make people who are used to making local procurement decisions comfortable, but I personally believe that we will drive better value for the taxpayer and for the government if we centralise procurement in this nation. And then the last piece of that puzzle, to my mind, is bringing new blood into the public service. One of the commitments in the programme for government was to reform the upper levels of the public service by bringing in fresh talent and people from the outside. I think that's a huge step in the right direction. In 2010, 12 such positions were advertised and 1 was filled outside of the sector. And now we have a promise that every position that will be filled above principal officer will be for somebody outside the sector. I accepted, as was mentioned earlier, a role within the top-level appointments commission because I feel there is now a wind of change. And I actually think that blending in, if it's done properly, because I think, as was said earlier, and I would agree with Robert's sentiments, that we have a lot of very good people in the public service. So I'm talking about blending in fresh thinking, fresh talent. I think in an environment where change and reform are the dominant themes, bringing in fresh talent and new thinking is absolutely the right thing to do, and I was happy to accept on that basis my role in the top-level appointments commission. So to sum up what I'm saying, I'm very optimistic about the future of foreign direct investment in this country. I think if we're serious about the jobs agenda, then we need to get serious about jobs and we need to move it centre stage. And I judge centre stage. What does that mean? It means what I hear people talking about, what I read in the papers about, and I don't see jobs discussed as often as I see other subjects. And I suppose that brings me to a point I'll say again, may not sit comfortably here. I think we need to get more business people engaged in the jobs agenda, and I think we're giving far too much airtime to what I would call commentary economists in this country. The practitioners and the people who have actually gone out there and who know how hard it is to create a job, whether you're working in a HP or whether you're working in a corner shop, they're the people who know the real issues that are faced by this by this economy in creating jobs, and there's just too much paralysis by analysis by what I would call commentary economists. And I respect that there are a lot of very good quality economists here who I would not put into that category, but I do think there's a category we're giving too much airtime to. Don't take foreign direct investment for granted. Hold the line on the competitiveness adjustments that we've made and drive down the cost of government. And I think they will be part of the recipe of driving and retaining the foreign direct investment gains that we've made in this nation. We can't, so to come back to the theme that we were actually asked to speak about here, we can't dine out on the Queen and Obama forever. Okay? The next 100 weeks have got to be about decisive action and not populism. And if I left you with one sort of what I would call management speak, it's not something I made up, but something we have, which is that there are 4 stages of any team's development. You have forming, storming, norming, and performing. Okay? The first 100 days have had ample amounts of the first 3. The next 100 weeks have absolutely, in my view, got to be all about performing. And that's what I'll be looking for from this government, and indeed from every elected politician who is part of the Oireachtas going forward over the next couple of years. They have simply got to perform, and we have to demand that of them. So thank you very much indeed for that and for listening to me. And with that, I'll hand back to Mary to introduce our next speaker. Thank you, Glenties.